going to pass the virtual mic to Mr. Bob Flores to give us some insight on what happened with SolarWinds. What did we learn? What do we need to think about 5G secure software development?
Thanks, Junaid. I appreciate it. So at the end of the day, the attack on SolarWinds was an attack on the supply chain, and it's something cybersecurity people have been worried about for a long, long time. And we often looked at that when we were at CIA as, okay, this is great. We're going to go out and buy this computer or whatever, but what's inside the computer and who builds that? Who's making that? And do those people have secure processes in place so that we can ensure that when we get a computer and it doesn't have memory chips or something like that, or they're sucking all our data? So, there's been a lot written so far on the SolarWinds thing. I think what's important here is that it was a very, very sophisticated attack, well thought out, well planned, even to the extent of doing lots of practice inside the SolarWinds network before they actually, launched the malware inside. And they did it so well that SolarWinds themselves didn't even know it had happened. This thing was discovered by FireEye, and not because FireEye was doing an investigation of SolarWinds, but because FireEye was a victim. And FireEye saw some weird things going on in their network. And as they dug into this, they realized that SolarWinds was the problem. And so they were able to then work with SolarWinds to identify that it was in the Orion product and pretty much exactly what had happened. And, this breach was far wider than originally thought. There's some 300,000 customers that have this product, and it was thought originally that only 18,000 of them had actually downloaded the patch that had the malware in it. We're now finding out that there's many more than the 18,000, and this is, I'm sure you've read the news on this. Many government agencies have been compromised because of this in some fashion, and we don't know what fashion that is just yet. The malware itself was not necessarily programmed to cause harm. There's some suspicion that it's essentially a sleeper agent, and it's embedded in there so that at some point in the future, when somebody wants access to the network, they can use the backdoor created by the malware to come into the network. But frankly, we don't really know that. We think it was Russians. It's very difficult to say 100% that it was Russian or anybody else for that matter. These things can be spoofed. All of those characteristic signatures, kind of like we do characteristic signatures on bomb makers, points to Russians, but we will never know if that's the case unless they actually stand up and take responsibility for it, which you never know, they might do. And so the lessons here, I think the important lesson for everybody on the call here is that don't neglect your supply chain. And that goes whether you're in the grocery business or the 5G business, it doesn't really matter. You have to, go all the way back, and many of us recommend you go at least 4 layers back into the supply chain. And you not only contractually, you put in place certain things so that if your supplier has a breach, they let you know about it. That should be written down in your contracts. And you might even want to work out with sort of your first tier suppliers, who's responsible for cleaning up the breach, if it involves your data. And that can go kind of either way, depending on the situation. You've got to look and dig into, this is hard to do, but dig into the security practices of your supply chain, your suppliers. So nowadays, many of them will tell you what they're doing. Some of that you just have to trust. If you want to get really careful about this, you can ask to go in and have an independent assessment done of your suppliers, but of course you'll have to pay for that. Counterfeit hardware has been a problem for some time. That's not what happened in this case, but we do continue to see it. Very famous case of Cisco firewalls being counterfeited, and people didn't know about it for some time. There are products on the market now that help to discover these kinds of things. So if you're have suppliers that are providing hardware that there's concern there about counterfeits, then it would behoove you to utilize those kinds of things. NIST itself has a whole array of things based on supply chain management. And so I would encourage everybody, I'm not going to repeat all of what they've done. It's readily available on their website, and they've done a really thorough job of speaking to the problem, not SolarWinds specifically, but supply chain, and providing plans for people to go out and execute to help keep the risk down. Like anything else in security, nothing is 100%, but if you don't do anything, then you're just a sitting duck.